What's up, everybody? It's Ronald here with another episode of Spare Time Well Spent. For those that missed the first episode of Spare Time, these episodes are for pieces I've recorded that don't quite make sense as a full in-canon episode of Time Well Spent. I'll experiment with formats, I'll bring in guests for conversations, and we'll see what works and what doesn't work. So for devoted Time Well Spent fans, this is a little something extra for you. This is like when you go to McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's and you order fries and you eat all the fries on the way home, and then you get to the bottom of the bag, get your burger, and there's all these extra fries. That's what this is like. This is like when you go to McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's and you get some chicken nuggets and you only order a 5 or a 6 piece or whatever strange number combination they have, and you open it and there's like a 7 or 8th piece in there. This is what that's like. This is like when you go to Chipotle and you order a burrito or a burrito bowl and you ask for guac and you get to the register and they don't charge you for the guac and you don't say anything because you're a dishonest person. This is not like that. This is not like that at all. But do not despair. We have full episodes of Time Well Spent in production, and those will be released very soon. So recently I started collaborating with Stephanie Logan. She's the host of the DC Diary podcast. Subscribe. We hit it off and became relatively fast friends. We found that we agree on a lot of things, and the things we don't agree on become pretty elaborate and in-depth discussions. One discussion we had was about whether or not there are leagues in dating. Oftentimes you'll hear the term, he's out of my league or she's out of my league, or the worst one, I'm out of your league. And while the kindest of us hope that such things as leagues don't exist, I personally believe that they do. Here's a little conversation that Stephanie and I had about leagues and dating and our personal thoughts on both. I apologize in advance for the little echo you hear in our conversation. We weren't exactly in a studio when we recorded. So me and you have been talking a lot recently about dating, in particular, the idea of someone being in and out of your league. And the way this came up was because you are very tall. How tall are you?
6'2".
Okay. So when we were talking about the fact that there's a certain height of guy that doesn't even register for you. How tall is that?
So, well, here's generally when I walk into a bar and I kind of like look across the top, anybody who's like poking out, that would be somebody who I guess be in my league. Anybody who I can see over the top of everybody else. So generally that's about like 5'11", 6 foot. But you know, with a good personality, maybe a 5'10".
So you have the personality bump. That'll give you, okay.
That'll give me a couple inches.
So in general, we talked a little more and we talked about the idea that you have bare minimum requirements, which actually creates what's in or out of the league. Because I think a lot of people don't like the idea of being considered in or out of someone's league. But the honest truth is that we create these ourselves. And I think the only time it becomes problematic is when we start stating that so-and-so is out of my league or I'm out of so-and-so's league. But in our heads, we do it all the time. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. So I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I think that if you kind of think about it as like a bell curve. So on one end, you have people who are like incredibly hot, and they're like mostly out of most people's leagues. And then on the other hand, you have people who are just unfortunately unattractive. And so you've got those two ends of the spectrum. And then you've got a big swath of people in the middle. And I think generally most people are in that range. So I think when you're talking about people being in your league, I think that range is a lot bigger than people might think, or I think that range is a lot bigger than people might consider. And so then you start laying on other things that are, other things that are, you prioritize things that are important to you. So for me, I want someone who's passionate, who likes doing outdoorsy things, who, wants a family, who has a good sense of humor. So all those things you kind of pack on top. And so your league gets more narrow based on preferences, but I think like your league generally is pretty broad.
So you talked about the bell curve and people being in the middle and thinking that it's wider than they think. However, I would argue that the bell curve is true when it comes to the extremely hot and the unfortunately unattractive, as you stated. Please email Stephanie for your concerns on that, not Ronald. But it seems like just because all of those people fall in the middle doesn't necessarily mean that they view themselves that way, because there's plenty of people on the unfortunately attractive side who think of themselves as super hot, and there's people on the super hot side that think of themselves as unfortunately attractive, and then there's a bunch of people in the middle who also have no idea what they look like at all. I will say that it turns out like the people that you tend to go after always tend to fall in around the same range. Like, you don't have, okay, so have you noticed that, does your personal dating look like the bell curve? Meaning, do you have like a couple that are super hot, a couple that are unfortunately unattractive, and then a lot in the middle?
Yeah, I think that's true.
Okay.
I mean, but here's the thing. I've dated some real hot guys, not to brag, but they're always so boring. And so I do actually tend not to go for guys that I think are really hot, just because it's like, I would rather have fun and enjoy myself than to just have like arm candy or someone who I think looks nice going around town. That
means that you have to like lower your standards, lower your bare minimum requirements.
I wouldn't say lower your standards. You just kind of change the barometer you're using. So if you're only judging people based on how hot they are, then sure, that's a barometer you can use, but I chose not to use that one as like the main thing that I'm evaluating people for.
Gotcha. But I was talking in terms of height. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically you'd have to let in some shorties.
Yeah, I'd have to let some shorties in.
Are you ready for that?
Yeah, I've actually become a lot more comfortable with it. I've always been confident in my height. I don't know. I think a lot of tall women have some kind of complex around it. And I've been really fortunate that I've always seen it as a positive, and I've used my height when I played volleyball in college, and it was always something that I was proud of. And the only time that I felt uncomfortable about it was when, like, kind of in dating, and I always felt I don't like to feel a lot bigger than somebody I'm with. And so it's something that I've become more comfortable with, realizing that not every guy that I date has to be 6'4" or 6'5", and probably those guys have some other kind of complex that's related to their height too. So I think in the last couple of years, I've definitely expanded the height of guys that I'm willing to date.
So what about y'all? Do you have deal breakers in dating? Who's included or not included in your leagues of dating? How do you rule folks in or out? You can reach out to me directly on Twitter or Instagram at OhitsBigRon. If you have a unique perspective, maybe we could feature you on a future episode of the show. Special thanks to the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder for the music in this episode, and to Stephanie Logan for joining me for this conversation. Be sure to check out her podcast, DC Diary, which is available wherever you consume your podcasts. As I mentioned before, we have some exciting new episodes of Time Well Spent coming out soon, so stay tuned to the feed. But in the meantime, if you want to help OhitsBigRon Studios grow, go to patreon.com/OhitsBigRon. We got some cool offerings on there for contributing patrons, including stickers, magnets, and tote bags, with the lowest contribution starting at just $2 an episode. Again, that's patreon.com/OhitsBigRon. Time Well Spent will return soon. Thanks for listening. Okay, can you test? Go ahead. Test. This is Ronald. Can you please be serious?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Test.
Ronald,
testing.
This is Ronald. Ronald, this is Ronald. I have to test your levels. You have to talk.
Stephanie.
Ronald, this is Ronald.
Stephanie.
Don't just say your name.
Why
what do you
say your name?
No, I'm totally kidding. Your levels are fine. Okay.